Hey everybody, welcome to Workforce Gaming. I am Brad. Final Fantasy XVI. This game is incredible. I am a huge Final Fantasy fan. I just want to start with the fact that this is top tier Final Fantasy. 9 and 10 are the kind of the two that I always hold in my brain as like those are the Final Fantasies, 9 and 10. And there are times, and I've only played through this once, I've played through both of those a few times. Only playing through this once, I'm leaning towards almost including that as like, those are my Final Fantasies that you need to play 9, 10, and 16. 6 is great, 4 is great, 7's great. All those are really, really good, but those two, and maybe this one, are the ones that in my brain are like, this is in the, 30-ish year, 25-ish year of this franchise. Those are the ones you need to play. So one of the main things that kind of came out with Final Fantasy 16 is the gameplay. So Final Fantasy, and I don't want to take forever with this, has evolved gameplay over the years. If you go all the way back to like Nintendo, the original Nintendo, Super Nintendo, it's very turn-based. That follows through in the PlayStation 1 era, and there's bits and pieces kind of changed with it too. 12 changes it substantially. 11 and 14, you get MMO things. 15 starts leaning towards, okay, what if we make this action combat? So 16 comes out and is revealed to have this super heavy action combat, and it's actually done by one of the guys who's worked on Devil May Cry. So Devil May Cry, again, just super hardcore action game, amazing gameplay. So this game leans very hard that way. And I think this is really controversial for people just because, again, especially, and it's weird for me to say this, but people like me who've been around with the series for 20 plus years at this point. And I think because I really like those style games as well, I had no issue with this. And I think the reason why is because it's not we shifted to action and you can feel like, oh, this is, I think sometimes when a game shifts, you can kind of go, okay, this is kind of your first attempt at this. One that comes to mind is Yakuza or Like a Dragon is an amazing game, but you can kind of feel some of our first turn-based game things and they're moving from action to turn-based. This going from turn-based to action, it's not there. It is fun. It is incredible. It feels very simple when you start. It's a lot of just square, 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 triangle when you start. Just basic actions. The dodge in this is really good, and there's actually an item you get later that makes it feel even better. The timing on it is very good. But as you're going through just kind of this action, and again, it's kind of a stylish action game, a character action game is really what this is modeled after. So you have just kind of your basic combo, and then you also have icon abilities. So icons are basically what have kind of traditionally been referred to as summons. In Final Fantasies, your Ifrits, your Shivas, your Odins, those type of guys. And all of those have the kind of those superpower moves. They're on cooldowns, so you can equip 2 of those at a time. And then also each one of these, as you go through and you acquire more of them, has their own special power. So one is like a really fast dash to an enemy. One is a grab. There's a couple like projectile lock-on things that go with this. So each one plays very different, and I think that's where this game starts to excel, is once you can kind of start to mix and match and feel what style gameplay fits you. Because depending on which ones you pick, it does change a lot of how your strategy works, which I think is really good. If you're only a little bit into this, or if you only played the demo, I do feel like the combat kind of takes maybe 10 hours until you've unlocked a lot of things to really hit that like, oh, I get it. This is what we're going towards. And once you hit that point, once you have some things that you can move around, mix and match, and play with, it does feel much, much better. It feels incredible. The other thing with that is I think a lot of games, and RPGs in particular, because you kind of get enemies that scale with you, you never really feel like you're getting that, your character's getting more powerful as you go through this. But with this game in particular, Clive, our main character, you can really feel him getting stronger as you go by the time as you unlock things. Because some of these moves are, kind of your ultimate attacks, your limit breaks, those types of things. As those click in and those happen, you can really feel Clive being stronger. You can feel the extra damage you're doing to the enemies. You can see kind of just because some of these, there's ones where, you burst into flames, and there's ones where giant tornadoes happen. And this game is incredible with set pieces and visuals and the way that magic looks and the way that what are traditionally summons look. And it just has some of those best power moves ever. You kind of almost get this like anime Dragon Ball Z power up feeling as you go through it, which is just great. So with these icons that you're unlocking, so Clive has this rare ability and I don't want to get too into spoilers here as we start to slowly transition into story. Clive has this rare ability to be able to hold more than one icon. So each icon has one person called their dominant. So one person is Shiva's dominant. One person is Odin's dominant. And that is the only person that can connect with that icon in here, except for Clyde, who can kind of acquire all of these. So when you go to fight these other icons, it is insane. A lot of times you'll start out with just as Clive, and then you'll be fighting like Odin, and he is giant, and he is huge, and you're just going at it, right? Or you're fighting Shiva, or you're fighting whichever one it may be. Some of them you do, some of them you don't. But it's just huge, these incredible set pieces. I would argue that they are some of the best set pieces in any video game ever. Just these fights feel so crazy. And with that, too, I think part of that is you feel it in the world. So when these things happen, like, people run. If you see the Phoenix show up, you're running. You see a Freet show up, you are booking it, because they are leveling cities. They are leveling castles in these fights. And you can see it, you can feel it. It's incredible. The thing with that as well is they're actually fun. I think a lot of games kind of get these, okay, we're going to do a big, huge set piece fight. We're going to do this big thing. And it just feels like, okay, I'm just mashing buttons. I'm just doing whatever. It doesn't feel like, just let me play the actual game. I don't need this weird little silly giant monster fight in here. The way this is set up, though, these feel just as good. Some of them mimic that combat very well. Some of them are kind of more of the traditional big set piece, quick time, that thing, but they all just feel so incredible. With Clive kind of powered up, fighting like one single enemy, like a dragoon or a knight or somebody like that, or even another dominant when they're kind of, they call it primed when you start turning into these icons. Just those one-on-one fights with Clive, they're huge set pieces, and it's just, they're so good, the one-on-one fights. It stands head and shoulders above most even action games, let alone what you'd expect in a Final Fantasy. So kind of moving into some story things here. The game does, again, a lot of interesting kind of, I don't want to say unique, but things that are unique in a Final Fantasy game that you don't see very much in these and in some games as a whole. But so to start with, the game is heavily focused on Clive. This is Clive's story. Every Final Fantasy game up till now, you kind of get a party, and that party is together. 15, you had kind of the road trip vibe, right? These guys are just there together the whole time running through this. Old traditional ones, if you go back to Super Nintendo, PlayStation, you're kind of picking up guys as you go. Oh, okay, like I met Tifa, I met Barrett, here's Vincent, right? And you're kind of running into these guys as you go through the game. This is Clive's story. You are Clive. Yes, there are side characters, and those side characters, there are 2 or 3 that are incredible. Sid, in particular, who you meet fairly on, is like this resistance leader. He is amazing, fantastic character. His portrayal is fantastic. He's built up as this resistance hero, and just the way that he interacts with everything, it's great. These characters are still there, but it's not like, in a normal game where it's a normal Final Fantasy where you have, okay, this is kind of the part where we meet Barrett. We learn all about Avalanche, and we get this kind of thing. Or, okay, this is when we meet this new mage, and we need to go find the spell for the mage, like in Final Fantasy IV. It is very much Clive, 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 Clive. Oh yeah, Sid's here. Clive, 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 Clive. Oh, but Jill's here for a minute. Oh, Clive, 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 Clive. Which I think actually is kind of just a breath of fresh air for a game like this that's this long to focus so much on that. And what I think even makes Clive in particular more interesting, and just the game as a whole more interesting, is that it actually takes place over 3 time periods. So the first couple hours, and if you played the demo, that is Clive's kind of younger, teenage, 20-ish years, kind of becoming a shield for his brother, kind of this protector of the dominant of his nation. And then some events happen. There's a time skip, right? And now you're playing Clive. Okay, Clive's in a different part of his life. He's kind of left his kingdom. And again, I'm trying to be as general as possible here. He's kind of left his kingdom, is now more of an outcast for reasons, and is kind of exploring the world through that eyes. And then again, you play there for maybe 10 hours, and then there's another time skip, and this is where the bulk of the game is. I would say the most kind of the key pieces of the game fit into this time period, and this is, okay, now Clive's kind of aboard this resistance type of thing, kind of going against what the rest of the world is doing. Again, general concept there. And it's very cool to see the evolution of Clive from very, very much driven by, I'm going to protect my kingdom and do what's best here, to by the end of the game and later on in the game, not even the end of the game, but just kind of moving away from that perspective and seeing, okay, he grew up this way. This is what made him kind of take a hard stance in a different way, to this is him kind of fully evolved and realizing what's going on. I mentioned kingdom things, a couple things here. This game very much has the, like, and everybody said it, the Game of Thrones influence, where it's, oh, this country, this country, this country, this country, all vying to control the world and vying to do their thing. And when their dominants show up, blah, everything happens, and then people die, and da 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 da. It very much has that feeling, and I have to admit that is incredibly dull. I can't get into it, and by, I would say, probably 3/4 of the way through, there are parts where it's just like, oh man, like, I'm just going to tune out for a second, because you're just talking about how this kingdom met this kingdom, and this prince should have done this, and this, and it's not the interesting part, but it does play a major part. The cool thing, though, is because there's so much of this, and if you kind of tune out, it has what's called active time lore, so you hold the touchpad, and then you can just bring up any of, like, it's normally somewhere between 3 and 8 different options of things to, like, get extra background on. So you're like, oh crap, who the hell is this guy? He's Prince somebody. And you hold the button, it's like, oh, he's Prince there, and it'll give you like a little write-up, and depending on importance, it might be 3 sentences or 3 paragraphs, but it'll say, oh yeah, this prince is the prince of this, who knows Clive because of this, who one time did this. And you're like, oh yep, okay, got it. So as you kind of see these things, you kind of get extra background. So again, you took 2 days off of playing the game, and that thing happened 8 hours ago in game time. So you're 5 days removed from knowing what this thing is, and boom, there it is. Quick refresher. Anytime you want any cutscene, it's one of the coolest things for somebody who plays games now, having a couple of under 5 kids, where you're constantly getting interrupted, constantly having to pause, constantly having to go back. It's just kind of a good refresher for it, and I think that's a very unique thing that this does, and a very first time I've ever seen it. And it's such a cool way to kind of fill in the world of the story. But getting back to it, the story has plays on Final Fantasy that I think are very interesting. So again, summons can only be connected to one person called the Dominant. And that person is like a god in their country. Like, one of the early missions Clive does is, we're going to go in and we're going to kill blank's Dominant. And that's the only person we care about. And the game is very specific. Like, that is your mission. Whoever else doesn't matter. I don't care. But find them, kill them, because that is the person, when these dominants show up, that just, there's scenes in the game where they're leveling cities and they're leveling entire armies. And it's just such a cool concept that, no, it's not Yuna going to these temples to get a summon to help her, and the summon just shows up and it attacks only the specific one little person. It's no. These are big world-changing events, which just really makes those things have a huge impact. Along with that, the game's setting and story kind of really does use magic in a way that I think is very cool for a Final Fantasy game. It's one particular group has it, and they're kind of ostracized because of it. These they call them bears. They put a mark on them, and they're treated like absolute shit throughout the game, and that kind of leads to a much darker tone than I think we get in a lot of Final Fantasies, and that comes and goes with each game. But there's a lot of scenes where it's just, oh my god, we're just trying to make this depressing as hell with how we're treating these people and what you're seeing them do. There's 1 or 2 side quests in particular that I'm thinking of, where you just kind of get kind of this world fleshed out of what's going on with bears, and it's like, okay, these people suck. Like, let's go take care of this now. So again, the world is interesting, that darkness, that way they use icons and summons. There's a couple other twists I don't necessarily want to get into, but crystals are kind of a Final Fantasy thing and have been around forever. They kind of take those and use those in kind of a different way than you've seen in other Final Fantasy games. I will admit, by the end of this, it is, Final Fantasy to a T, which if you've played the majority of Final Fantasy games, you kind of know what the end of a Final Fantasy game looks like. This very much kind of gets into that by the last few hours. We're like, oh, yep, okay. And here's where the bad guy's going to do this. Yep, okay. And the bad guy, this is their goal. Yep, okay. And this is why we're going to stop. Yep. And we're a little conflicted if that's the right thing, but you kind of get all those traditional Final Fantasy things. And that's, I think, what kind of pulls this back to me, because I think there's a lot of discussion with this game going on is this a Final Fantasy? Is this kind of carrying on that legacy, or have we completely abandoned what makes Final Fantasy Final Fantasy? I really think this does feel it because of the way that those things are presented, because of the way the characters are presented, because we have those important callbacks to different Final Fantasies. We have, as much as they play with it, still a traditional Final Fantasy story structure with where Clive starts and where Clive ends, where the world starts, where the world ends throughout the timeline of this game. I think very much does hit that traditional Final Fantasy pattern. I said this almost hits 9 and 10 in terms of where I put it in Final Fantasy rankings. It's close. I think maybe, replaying it once or twice might get it there for me, but the side quests in this, the background on this game is it's done by Creative Business Unit 3, who are the MMO Final Fantasy people. They did 14. You can kind of feel that in some of the side quests where it's just like, oh, here's side quest number 6 of going to get sand. Go get me sand. And you go get the sand. Go hunt these monsters. I would say probably 80 or 90% of the side quests I did fall into the bad/boring. There are a couple of the ones that do stand out in my brain. There's one where you meet this guy and he keeps going, oh, these wolves keep attacking these bears and da-da-da-da. And it kind of, again, it builds the world and builds your perspective of how people are feeling with it. But 80, 90% of them are, oh, go talk to this person. Hey, this person needs this, which I ended up, by the end, I skipped a lot of them. It does have a unique feature where ones that will give you good rewards, meaning it's not like, oh, you got more gil or you got whatever, but it gives you a permanent upgrade or a very cool item. They're marked differently on your map. So you can kind of go, okay, that's an important one. I should do that when I'm going to get something cool. Might be a good side quest, might be a boring side quest, but at the end, I'm going to get something good. The only other kind of negative thing I felt with this is there were a few parts that dragged, and I kind of mentioned the kingdom stuff being a little bit boring. There's a few parts where it dives heavy into that, and you spend a good hour or two just kind of living in the, what's this kingdom doing, and why is this prince bad, and what's this emperor doing? And eventually a lot of that's revealed to kind of have some more intriguing backstory to it than just trying to become the most powerful empire. But in the moment especially, that feels a little slow, just it's not my thing. Not a Game of Thrones person, never was. Like, just that kind of stuff, just not my deal. And there is, and I think it's there to kind of, again, justify that this is a Final Fantasy, this is an RPG, it's not just a straight action game. There is a few kind of those main quests where it's like, okay, we need to build our boat. Go get the stuff to build our boat. Okay. The person we met 4 hours ago kind of needs some help. Why don't you go help them out? Go check in with them. And again, I think that's to kind of harken back to some of the old Final Fantasy things. So not my favorite. I get why it's there. It slows the game down, but that's kind of where I land on, okay, amazing. Not quite 9 and 10 in my brain, or, again, whichever one happens to be your favorite Final Fantasy. Overall, this is easily one of my favorite Final Fantasies, one of my favorite games for sure of this year, if not for the last few. It is just incredible. It is, when I play something like, I'm just going to go back to 4 because that's the last one that I played. When you go back to something like 4 and you see these epic moments and you hear about these epic things that characters are talking about, this is the most they've ever been visualized and realized in that way, that when I played 9 as a kid, when I played 7 as a kid, when I played 6 a few years ago, that you kind of picture in your brain, okay, when this is happening, like, whoa, that's what this looks like. Like, this is a huge event. 6 in particular has kind of this major turning point towards the middle 2/3 of the way through the game. And when I envision what that looks like, 16 is showing me what that would look like. And it's incredible. I love it. I cannot say enough good things about it. Anyway, we are Workforce Gaming. We try to put out new videos every Monday. Leave a comment below. Subscribe to our channel. See you later.